He wasn't daydreaming. He wasn't texting. He was drawing. And no one knew that what he did next would leave his teacher speechless. The classroom buzzed with the usual noise of middle school chatter. Desks scraped the tile floor, sneakers tapped nervously under tables, and someone's pencil rolled off the edge with clatter. But in the very last row, right beside the window, sat a boy who made no noise at all. His name was Eli Carter. He was 12. He didn't talk much. He didn't raise his hand. And most days, people forgot he was even there. Eli wore the same worn hoodie almost every day. His hair hung a little over his eyes. He never caused trouble, but he never really stood out either. His grades were okay, never great. He wasn't failing, but he wasn't impressing anyone either. Most teachers assumed he was lazy. What they didn't know was that while they were explaining fractions or the Revolutionary War, Eli's hand was moving not to take notes, but to draw. Every page of his notebook was covered in sketches, not scribbles, real drawings, detailed faces, full of emotion, giant mechanical dragons wrapped around city skyscrapers, dinosaurs with sunglasses skateboarding through alleyways, entire worlds, all drawn in secret. But no one saw it, except for one person. On a Tuesday morning in October, Mrs. Thompson, the English teacher, glanced toward the back of the room. While reading out loud from a novel, she saw Eli hunched over his desk. She assumed he was ignoring her lecture. She walked over with quiet steps and, in one quick motion, snatched a notebook from his desk. Eli froze. The room went silent. She turned the book toward herself, flipping through the pages, expecting meaningless doodles. What she saw stopped her mid-step. Her eyes widened. She didn't say a word. She closed the notebook and walked away. Taking it with her, Eli just stared down at his desk, heart racing, face burning red. At the end of the class, she didn't return the book. She didn't call him out. She didn't even look at him. That night, Eli barely slept. That notebook was everything. He had never shown it to anyone, not even his parents. He thought she'd be angry. He thought he'd be in trouble. But something strange happened the next day. The notebook was still gone. And yet, when Eli walked into class, Mrs. Thompson smiled at him. Only him. Then she continued the lesson like nothing had happened. It was confusing, unsettling, and the beginning of something much bigger than Eli ever imagined. Something that would change how the entire school saw him. Something that would make his teacher speechless. But at that moment, Eli had no idea what she had seen or what she was about to do next. He just knew someone was finally paying attention. The classroom was empty after the final bell, but Mrs. Thompson remained seated at her desk, the confiscated notebook in front of her. She opened it slowly. Each page pulled her deeper. There were no captions, no titles, just drawings, dozens of them, some in pencil, some in ink, and some shaded so well they looked like photographs. Each one told a story without saying a word. She saw scenes that looked like comic book panels, mysterious characters standing under lamplight, monsters lurking behind broken walls, and kids flying above rooftops on mechanical wings. But what struck her most were the expressions, the eyes, the emotion in them, pain, hope, loneliness. It was as if Eli had poured his entire world onto the paper, and somehow no one had noticed. Mrs. Thompson closed the notebook and sat in silence for a long time. She had been teaching for 15 years. She thought she had seen everything, but she had never seen anything like this come from a 12-year-old. The next morning, she did not return the notebook. She didn't want to embarrass him in front of the class, but she wrote something on a small sticky note and tucked it into the front page before placing it in her drawer. Later that day, the school held its monthly staff meeting. At the end of it, during the informal coffee break, Mrs. Thompson pulled the art teacher, Mr. Delgado, aside. "I need you to see something," she said. She handed over the notebook without a word. Mr. Delgado began flipping through it, pausing often, eyebrows raised. "Who did this?" he asked. "Well, my students. Eli Carter. He's in your English class?" "Yes." "I've never seen him in the art room. He's never submitted anything." Mr. Delgado closed the notebook and stared at it like it might come alive. He's got something rare. You should show him this. I want to, but carefully. He's withdrawn. I get it, Mr. Delgado nodded. Let me know if he's willing to talk. Or better yet, tell him about this. He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a flyer. It was for a National Youth Illustration Contest. The winner's artwork would be published in a children's book, along with a cash prize and a feature in the state's biggest art magazine. Mrs. Thompson folded the flyer and slid it into the notebook behind the sticky note. That afternoon, she returned the sketchbook to Eli's desk before he came in. When Eli walked in and saw it, he paused. He stared at it like it was a ghost. He opened it slowly, expecting some kind of warning or punishment. But instead, he found a yellow sticky note inside the cover. It read, "You should enter. The world deserves to see what I saw." Below it, the folded flyer. He didn't show any expression, just closed the book and kept it closed for the rest of the day. But that night, when the lights were off and the house was asleep, Eli turned on the small desk lamp beside his bed. He took out the flyer and stared at it for a long time. Then he pulled out a fresh sketch pad and started drawing. Eli didn't tell anyone, not his classmates, not his teachers, not even his parents. He had always kept his art a secret, and even now, with a real opportunity in front of him, he couldn't bring himself to talk about it. But something had shifted. Mrs. Thompson's note. It did something to him. For the first time, someone had seen him. Not just noticed, but really seen. So he began drawing with purpose. He transformed the corner of his bedroom into a quiet little studio. He didn't need much. A desk lamp, a couple of pencils, and stacks of printer paper he stole from the family computer cabinet. At school, he paid attention just enough to stay out of trouble. But his mind was somewhere else, plotting, imagining, building his world. He started sketching scenes from a story he had been carrying in his head for months. A story about a boy who didn't speak, but could see things others couldn't. The boy could draw portals, windows into different realms. When he drew them, they became real, and those drawings became the only way he could connect with others. It was personal, too personal. Every line he drew felt like peeling off a layer of himself and putting it on the page. But that's what made it good. That's what made it his. During lunch, he'd sit by himself, eating quietly while his free hand moved across a sketchbook. During recess, he'd hide behind the bleachers and draw, the roar of kids playing nearby fading into the background. His hands never stopped. At night, he worked until his eyes couldn't stay open. He wasn't trying to win. He wasn't thinking about the prize. He just wanted to finish the story, to make it real, to prove to himself it mattered. But the deadline crept closer, and he wasn't sure he'd make it. One Friday afternoon, as he sat in the library sketching a chase scene, someone's shadow passed over his table. He looked up and saw Mr. Delgado, the art teacher. Eli froze. Mr. Delgado didn't say anything at first. He just glanced at the sketch and smiled slightly. "You got the kind of brain that turns silence into pictures," he said. Eli didn't answer. "I saw your notebook," Mr. Delgado continued. "You're not just drawing. You're telling stories." Eli nodded once, slowly. "Mrs. Thompson told me you're entering the contest." Eli hesitated. Then he whispered, "I'm trying. That's all it takes." Mr. Delgado reached into his bag and pulled out a small box. "Take these. Colored pencils. Good ones. You can't finish a masterpiece with a dull blade." Eli stared at the box. He didn't move. "Don't worry," Mr. Delgado added with a wink. "You don't owe me anything. Just finish it." And then he walked away. Eli didn't say thank you, but he held the box in both hands for the rest of the afternoon. That night he didn't sleep. He just drew. All night, and when the sun came up, his story was finally complete. But what came next, no one could have predicted. The day of the contest showcase arrived with little fanfare. To most students, it was just another Monday. The cafeteria had been cleared out, long folding tables stretched wall to wall, each one covered with colorful drawings and short comic panels taped neatly on display boards. Teachers walked around, pretending to be judges. Parents dropped by to snap a few pictures. To Eli, It felt like standing in the middle of a storm. He clutched his manila folder with both hands, pressing it tightly against his chest. Inside was everything. His finished project. A full 16-page hand-drawn storybook, each page lettered, colored, and shaded. No copies. No backups. Only the original. He had spent the entire weekend in his room, finishing every last panel, even skipping meals to get it done. The drawings weren't perfect. Some lines were crooked. Some colors bled. But it was honest. It was his. Mrs. Thompson stood near the front of the room, helping students place their entries on the tables. When she saw Eli walk in, her eyes lit up. She didn't say anything. She simply pointed to a spot at the end of the last row. Eli walked slowly. Every step felt heavy. He passed other students' drawings. Cheerful animals, superheroes with oversized muscles, rainbows and rocket ships. Bright, fun, polished. He suddenly felt like his work didn't belong there, like his story was too quiet, too serious, too different. When he reached the empty space at the end, he opened the folder and gently placed the book on the table. Then he stepped back and left the room without saying a word. The showcase continued for hours. Students came and went. Parents admired their children's work. Some laughed. Some took selfies. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker near the front. But then, near the back, something started to happen. A girl named Kayla noticed the book sitting alone. She opened it, flipped through the pages. She didn't smile. She didn't laugh. She kept reading, page after page. Then she whispered, "Whoa!" She turned to the boy next to her and handed it over. He opened it. His eyes widened. Within 20 minutes, a small crowd had formed at the far end of the cafeteria. Kids stopped talking. They stopped playing. They were reading. By the time Mrs. Thompson walked over to check what was happening, there were 10, maybe 15 people silently flipping through Eli's book. She didn't interrupt. She just stood nearby and watched. Each page held them in place. Each panel pulled them deeper. None of them knew Eli had written it about himself, that the boy in the story was him, that the monsters were his fears, the world his escape, the portals his way out. They only knew one thing. Whoever made this had something special, and yet Eli wasn't there to see it. He had gone home, hiding in his room, convinced he had just embarrassed himself in front of the entire school. He had no idea that by the next morning, everything would be different. The next morning started like any other. The sky was gray. The hall smelled faintly of pencil shavings and cafeteria pancakes, and Eli kept his head down as he walked through the front entrance. He hadn't slept much. He was still sure it had been a mistake to submit his work. He expected maybe 1 or 2 teachers had glanced at it, maybe smiled politely, and then moved on. He figured the book was already packed up, forgotten, shelved away with the rest of the entries that didn't win. But when he stepped into the hallway, he noticed something strange. People were looking at him, not with confusion, not with judgment, but with something else. Recognition. A girl from math class, someone who had never said more than 2 words to him, walked by and nodded. A boy from gym class gave him a quiet thumbs up. Even the janitor, Mr. Bruce, gave him a wink as he rolled his mop cart past. Eli walked faster. This wasn't normal. He slid into his English class early, hoping to escape whatever was happening. He found his seat in the back, pulled out his sketchbook, and tried to disappear into the page like he always did. But before the bell rang, Mrs. Thompson walked in and cleared her throat. The room hushed. She didn't open a textbook, didn't take attendance. She just walked to the front, holding a copy of something in her hand. It was Eli's book, printed, bound, in full color. Eli's heart stopped. "What I'm holding," Mrs. Thompson said, "is something that changed the way I see one of my students. Someone I had overlooked. Someone most of us have. This is not just a drawing. It's a story. And it's about someone who sees the world a little differently." She paused, then held the book up. The judges from the regional contest came by yesterday evening. They weren't expecting anything special. But then they found this, and after reading it, they made a decision. She looked straight at Eli. Eli Carter has been chosen as the grand prize winner. His book will be published nationwide. The class went completely still. Eli's pencil fell from his hand. He couldn't move. Mrs. Thompson walked toward his desk and handed him the printed copy. "It's yours," she said softly. "You earned it." There were no cheers, no applause, just silence, a kind of respectful, stunned silence. Then one voice whispered from the front row, "Wait, he made that." Another chimed in, "That was him?" And just like that, the entire room shifted. No longer was Eli the kid no one talked to. He was now the kid who had drawn something no one could stop thinking about. He was the one who turned silence into a story. But that was only the beginning, because the real surprise hadn't happened yet. The real moment, the one that would leave his teacher, his classmates, and even his parents completely speechless, was waiting just around the corner. It was nearly lunchtime when the announcement came over the intercom. "Eli Carter, please report to front office." Eli Carter to front office. Every head in the classroom turned toward him. Eli sat frozen for a second, then slowly rose from his seat. His sketchbook slipped from his lap and landed on the floor with a soft thud. He picked it up, hugged it to his chest, and walked out without saying a word. The hallway felt longer than usual. His sneakers squeaked against the floor. His palms were damp. He didn't know what this was about. Maybe the contest committee had changed their mind. Maybe there had been a mistake. As he reached the front office, the secretary greeted him with a strange, nervous smile. "They're waiting for you in the conference room," she said. "They?" She just nodded and pointed. Eli opened the door slowly. Inside, the room was bright. The blinds had been pulled open to let in the sunlight. There were 3 people sitting at the table: a man in a navy suit, a woman with glasses, and a leather folder. And next to them was Mr. Delgado. The art teacher gave him a smile that looked like he'd been waiting weeks for this moment. "Eli," the man in the suit said, standing up and reaching out his hand. "It's good to finally meet you. I'm Robert Langford, executive editor at Golden Maple Press." Eli blinked. Golden Maple was one of the biggest children's publishers in the state. The woman stood up next. "I'm Dana Hall," she said, head of creative development. Eli shook their hands slowly, eyes darting between the adults. "We came here after reading your book yesterday," Langford continued. "Your story, it didn't just win the contest. It changed the way we think about what a young artist can do." Dana opened her folder and slid a document across the table. "We'd like to publish your story," she said. "For real, full-scale release. In bookstores, libraries, nationwide." Eli stared at the paper. He couldn't speak. "We'd also like to feature you in a spotlight article in our next issue," Langford added. "You'll get full credit. Author and illustrator." Mr. Delgado leaned forward. "It's okay," he said softly. "Take your time." Eli opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Then finally, in the smallest voice imaginable, he asked, "Why?" Langford's smile didn't fade. "Because your story isn't just good," he said. "It's true, and everyone can feel that when they read it." Dana slid over a second folder. Inside were mock-ups of the cover, with Eli's name printed across the top in bold letters. "The Boy Who Drew His World." And below it, "By Eli Carter." Eli didn't even hear the rest. His heart was pounding too loud. When he finally stepped out of the office 20 minutes later, the sunlight looked brighter. The hallway seemed smaller. He felt taller, lighter. But nothing would compare to what happened when he walked back into the classroom, because his teacher, Mrs. Thompson, who had once taken his notebook thinking he was just another distracted kid, would soon be holding a copy of his book with tears in her eyes. When Eli walked back into room 214, he carried the publishing packet in both hands. He didn't say anything. His face was pale, but his eyes looked different, awake, brighter. Mrs. Thompson looked up from her desk. As the door closed behind him, the moment their eyes met, she could tell something had happened. He walked straight to her desk and handed her the folder without a word. She opened it slowly. Inside was the official letter from Golden Maple Press. Next to it, the draft of the publishing contract, and then the mock-up cover, printed in full color. At the top, the title in gold letters, "The Boy Who Drew His World." and just below it, by Eli Carter. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the paper, then back at him, eyes beginning to glisten. "This is real," she whispered. Eli nodded. "Like in stores?" He nodded again. The classroom had gone quiet. A few students were watching now, not laughing, not whispering, just watching. Mrs. Thompson sat back in her chair slowly, holding the cover like it might dissolve in her hands. She looked at Eli with something between disbelief and admiration. "You did it," she said softly. But Eli wasn't finished. From his backpack, he pulled out a single-printed copy of the book, hot off the press. He placed it on her desk, then turned to the first page. There, in delicate lettering, it read, "From Mrs. Thompson, the first person who saw me." She covered her mouth with one hand. A tear slid down her cheek. The classroom remained frozen. No one dared to speak. She looked up at him and smiled, but it was the kind of smile that held years of meaning behind it. She didn't need to say thank you. He didn't need to explain. Everything had already been said in the pages of that book. Then, slowly, a voice in the back of the room whispered, "Whoa!" And like ripples in a pond, others leaned forward. "Can we see it? Is that really his? Wait, it's going to be in stores." Eli turned toward the class. His shoulders straightened. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. Mrs. Thompson stood up, wiping her eyes. "Class," she said, holding up the book, "I think it's time we all read a new kind of story today." She walked to the front of the room, opened to page 1, and began reading aloud. And as her voice filled the classroom, the story of a silent boy who escaped into drawings became the story that silenced the room. Not with confusion, not with pity, but with awe. Eli sat down quietly, his heart full, a slight smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. No one whispered. No one scrolled through their phones. They listened, and for the first time, Eli wasn't just a quiet kid in the back of the class. He was the author of the book in their hands, and the boy who left his teacher speechless. The next few days moved like a blur. On Tuesday morning, Eli's story was featured in the local newspaper under the headline, "Middle School Illustrator's Book to Hit National Shelves." By that afternoon, the school's office was flooded with calls from parents, bookstores, and even 2 television stations. By Wednesday, a crew from Channel 9 News had set up cameras in the cafeteria. They arranged a special assembly, something that had never been done for a single student before. Rows of chairs were lined up in front of a small stage. Teachers whispered in the halls. Students took selfies by the bulletin board where the article had been pinned. Eli didn't know what to do with himself. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. He didn't like microphones. He didn't like crowds. He had spent his entire life trying to disappear, and now everyone wanted to see him. Mrs. Thompson found him outside the gym, pacing quietly, holding his book to his chest. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded barely. "You don't have to say much. Just be yourself." He looked up at her. "I don't know what that is." She smiled. "You're the boy who told the truth with a pencil. That's enough." The assembly began at noon. The cafeteria was packed. Students, teachers, parents, even the janitors came in to watch. On the stage stood the principal, a few representatives from Golden Maple Press, and, seated off to the side, Eli. He kept his head down until his name was called. Principal Harris stepped up to the mic. "Today, we celebrate something extraordinary. Not just a book, not just a contest win, but a voice, quiet but powerful, that reminded all of us what art is really about." She turned and gestured toward Eli. "This is the author and illustrator of The Boy Who Drew His World. Our very own Eli Carter." There was a long moment of silence. Then, like a rising wave, the room broke into applause. Students stood up. Teachers clapped. Even the lunch lady wiped a tear from her cheek. Eli walked to the microphone, his hands shaking slightly. He stared at the sea of faces in front of him. He had practiced what he might say in front of his mirror the night before. But none of it felt right now. So he just said what was in his heart. "I didn't think anyone would care about what I drew. I always thought I had to stay quiet because no one would understand it anyway." He paused. But Mrs. Thompson saw it, and then Mr. Delgado. And now you all do. He took a breath. I drew because it was the only way I could talk. He lifted the book slightly, showing it to crowd. This is what I've been trying to say. The room stood still. No more applause. No movement. Just silence. Respectful. Heavy. Honest. And that silence meant more to Eli than all the clapping in the world. He stepped back from the microphone, and when he turned to walk off stage, he saw something that froze him in place. At the very back of the room, standing near the doors, were his parents. His mom held a copy of the book in her hands. His dad had a camera hanging from his neck and tears running down his face. They hadn't known. He had never told them. But now they knew. The world was beginning to know. And Eli was finally okay with being seen. As the doors of the auditorium slowly creaked open, the crowd inside stirred with anticipation. A soft spotlight landed on the stage, casting a golden halo across the polished wood. Standing just behind the curtain, Tyler clenched a folder in his hand, his heartbeat thudding louder than the applause ahead. The art competition, called Visions of the Future, wasn't just any event. It was hosted by a prestigious nonprofit that partnered with schools and youth centers across the state. This year's winner would have their artwork turned into a public mural downtown and receive a scholarship to a well-known arts institute. But Tyler wasn't here for the prize. He was here for his mother. As the MC began reading the names of the top finalists, Tyler waited in silence behind the curtain. He could hear gasps and whispers of admiration as each piece was projected onto the large screen. Next, we have a submission that stunned every judge, the MC said. A story told entirely through lines, shades, and symbols. It came to us unsigned until we tracked it back to a middle school. Please welcome Tyler Andrews. The crowd erupted in polite applause, but someone in the third row stood up before anyone else. Miss Reynolds. Her eyes widened as Tyler stepped onto the stage, holding a large sketch pad that had been folded carefully in a brown envelope. The audience quieted. He opened it. One by one, he revealed a sequence of drawings. They weren't ordinary sketches. The first page showed a mother holding a child, wearing a nurse's uniform, her eyes tired yet smiling. The second showed a stack of unpaid bills and a fridge with nothing but a bottle of water inside. The third was a classroom with desks, students, and a teacher standing at the front, arms crossed. A lone boy at the back was drawing in a notebook. The fourth and fifth pages drew audible gasps. A hospital scene. The mother lying in a bed, machines hooked to her arms. A doctor whispering something to a boy. And finally, the last page. A boy holding a pencil like a sword, standing before a wall filled with rejection, failure, and misunderstanding. But behind him rose a mural of light, color, and hope. The room was dead silent. Miss Reynolds put a hand to her mouth. Then, an older man in a gray suit stood up near the back. His white beard was trimmed, his glasses thick. He stepped forward slowly, as if drawn by something magnetic in the sketches. Tyler looked up. The man took the mic from the MC. My name is Arthur Dennison. I served as the chair of this year's art panel. I've been in this industry for 35 years, and I've never been speechless like I am now. He turned to Tyler. You didn't just draw pictures. You told a truth most of us forget to see. This is what art is supposed to do. The applause started like a slow ripple, then grew into a wave. Some people stood. Others wiped their eyes. And Miss Reynolds, she stayed frozen in place, stunned, because now she realized what Tyler had been doing all along, while she saw a kid not paying attention. Tyler was documenting the world with more insight and emotion than most adults could ever manage. And now, the entire city would see it too. The projection behind the stage showed the final image again. Tyler standing before a gray world, transforming it with light. This time, the crowd didn't clap. They roared. Tyler didn't smile. He simply looked up, then stepped away from the mic. He had said everything he needed to say, without saying a single word.